Hi, my name is Richard Hajas, and I'm from Ojai, California, that's south of here. We're much smaller than Monterey, but we have a lot of things in common. We're a city that depends on tourism to support our street paving projects and police protection and all that good stuff. So we have a lot of the same culture that you have here in Monterey, including no parking. But we are much smaller. We only made up about 2,950 connections. We have a population of about 5,000 people. The players in our particular process was a Golden State Water Company that's much like Cal-Am. The Casitas Municipal Water District, which is the local water agency that we asked to take it over. Ojai Flow, which is the group that I belong to that spearheaded this project, and the California court system that played a very large role. The first thing I was asked to talk about is the cost and how we developed that and how well our estimates turned out. And the way we went about it, there were three primary elements to the final cost for us to take it over. The first is obviously how much was it going to cost to purchase the system. The second was how much money we were going to need to do battle through the legal process. And then the third, which is a very important one, we complained that our system was not well maintained. So how are we going to repair that system once we took it over? The cost element, how we figured out how much Golden State was worth, is a complicated moving target. Because what happens is on any given day, the company is worth as much money as they have invested in undepreciated assets. And they are constantly reinvesting in various projects. So we knew this was going to take a long time, and we couldn't just take a number in 2011 when we started and think that that was going to be good 5 or 6 years later. Golden State produced a master plan in 2010 that they presented to the PUC that listed $24 million in capital improvements that they intended to do over that 10-year period. So we could check off those projects and add those to the capital value of the facility each year. So we had this moving target. As they invested in the system became worth more, but the needed capital improvements that we would have to make theoretically became less, and they generally did. They didn't do all the things they should have, but generally they did. The other thing is, as time went by, the legal costs would continue to accumulate. So with that moving scale, we determined that we estimated that the cost of the buyout, including capital improvements, would be around $41 million if it occurred in the next, between 2011 and 2018. So once we were able to convince the water district to pursue this, which they finally did, and in February 2013, they adopted a resolution forming the improvement district and set an election for August 2013. Within just a couple of months of that date, Golden State Water filed an injunction to stop the election. The election went forward. The judge said he wasn't going to interfere with that. We'll deal with it after the election. The bond issue, which was a $60 million property bond issue to help fund this, was passed by 87% of the vote. And that's the $60 million was much more than the $41 million that we estimated, and the reason for that was Casitas if it was going to go to war, they wanted to go to war with a big war chest. So they wanted enough money to see it through to the end, and we determined that $60 million was affordable, and we would be willing to go that far.
There you go.
So we had the election. 30 days after the election, Golden State filed an injunction to overturn the election. They lost that case. In April of 2014, they filed an appeal to overturn the election. In May 2015, they filed to Supreme Court. And you can see the years ticking away here as we're paying, I think we had the second highest water rates in the United States. And we were pretty close. In July 2015, the Supreme Court fortunately expedited our case and returned that they would not hear the case. So they were not about to get involved in a community that had elected to tax itself. And finally, in February 2016, this is 3 years, after this process started, Casitas finally was able to issue bonds. They couldn't issue bonds while these court cases were going on, and they couldn't start eminent domain without the bonds. In February, they started the eminent domain process, and there's a whole process that both parties are legally required to do certain things. And the first thing was they set the eminent domain hearing for June. The other thing they did is they set a mandatory settlement agreement for April 6th of 2016. After almost 4 years of legal battles, they met on April 6, 2016. And I'm sorry. Get the year, there's so many years in here. The 2016 period was another just playing with the various cases. But Casitas makes a formal purchase and they go through all that process. And then in January 2017, 4 years later, we finally have a mandatory hearing or meeting and a settlement conference for April 6, 2017. Now that's 4 years later, more than 4 years later. So 4 years it took us to get to here. Casitas offered them $23 million. That was based on the appraisal. They wanted $120 million. 7 days after that conference, about 60 days before the first hearing on eminent domain, Golden State came back and said, you can have it for $30 million. But you got to take it by June 15th. So Casitas took possession of it on June the 15th and agreed to the $30 million purchase. Now, the $30 million was for the actual system that we bought. These are the details of the purchase. $30 million for the system, but they'd accumulated $4 million in retroactive rate increases and what they call the RAM charge, which is all those surcharges you have on your bill for water that you didn't buy. So there were an additional $4 million that we had to pay. We'd have to pay that anyway. You pay it over time on surcharges, or you pay it up front. So the total cost was $34 million. The total cost of the acquisition was $34 million for the purchase and paying off the RAM charges. Fortunately, we only accrued $1 million in legal fees over that 4-year period. And a lot of it had to do with Golden State threw everything they had at us, but I think really had a bad case. I don't think they intended to win. They were just delay. So our attorneys, fortunately, didn't spend that much money. And this was all of the administrative costs and everything. Casitas believes that they need $15 million to do the necessary improvements to the system, which they are planning to do and they're working on right now within 5 years. So the total cost to us was $50 million. The original cost back in 2011, the original estimate was $41 million. We didn't know about the RAM charges, which is $4 million of that. But we were pretty satisfied that we came that close when Golden State's first estimate was $120 million. Why did they suddenly agree to this? We think that they didn't want to go through the eminent domain process. They rarely do that unless they think they can win. And I think they were pretty sure we had a strong case and they didn't want to go there. I don't think they wanted to set a precedent on how much their system was worth. They would rather say they negotiated a sale than say a sale was forced on them. Ojai was a pain in their neck. That had a lot to do with it. Just like here, we went to all those PUC hearings. We gave them trouble on every time they tried to do something. It didn't help, but it irritated them. So I think they were pretty tired of us. We're a lot smaller than you, so they probably didn't care that much about getting rid of us, but still, it was a constant effort for 8 years. So what is all that worth to us? Well, one of the things you're going to hear is how we didn't really save money, or somebody else that did this doesn't really save money. I will tell you, you can talk to anybody that lives in our community and they know their water bills have gone down. We voted to add an assessment to our property, and those assessments range from about $325 a month, a year, to $2,000 a year, depending on the property size. The typical property has an assessment of $466, I think it is. The first year savings to the community was $730,000. And you have to add zeros for you guys because we're a lot smaller. Our total water costs were $6.2 million. So we reduced that by $730,000, and that includes the bond payment. So this is over and above the bond payment. The typical customer, which is someone that uses 13 units a month on a standard residential lot, including the bond payment, saves $366. And what happens when you're successful at this, Golden State's rates are frozen in time. They don't go up anymore because they're gone. And these numbers are all based on Golden State's 2016 rates compared to Casitas Municipal Water District's 2018-19 rates, which have gone up since 2016. So these are real savings. One of our biggest issues wasn't how much we were going to save right away. Ours was for the future. We wanted out of this vicious circle. And we looked at 35-year history of Golden State rate increases versus Casitas Water District rate increases. Golden State averaged 7.2% per year every year for 35 years. Casitas was 4%. So we used that number to get an idea of what the savings would be over the next 10 years, including paying for the bond. For the community, we estimate we'll save $25.8 million in 10 years. And again, you all can add a zero to it. And the typical customer will save $8,500 or $8,500 a year. Just to give you an idea, I have the highest assessment. I own an acre, so I paid $2,050 a year on my assessment. In the last year with Golden State, my water cost $3,470. Last year, the same service from Casitas cost $780. So I easily paid for that bond. These are some of the things you're going to hear, that all the costs are not included, all the costs are included. We paid for all of our capital improvements that we needed, and they're being done now, and they're paid for. The rates are going to go up because of those improvements. No, they're already paid for. And you're going to lose the protection of the PUC. The real story is we would have paid all of that money it cost to buy out Golden State, plus the RAM charges, the surcharges. We would have paid for that anyway over time. And we would have paid the cost of capital improvements at 8 to 10% return on investment. Well, we did it at about 4%, and we're going to get them done right away.
Yeah. Yes.
Anyway, Our organization was successful, and we're all glad we're pretty much done with this. But we do have a website, Ojai-Flow.com, that we're going to keep up for a while. There's a wealth of information on there that we would be happy for you to take a look at. There's feasibility studies, there's history on all these court cases, so you can kind of get an idea of what was going on. So good luck with your effort, and
Yes.
we'll be hoping the best for you.